Go full screen. Oh, hear me now? All right. Sorry, guys, I'm not used to using a microphone. There we go. All right, so today I wanted to talk about rendering JavaScript on the server. So you guys might know it as like Angular Universal. And I'm actually part of the Angular Universal core team. And one of the things we've been really lacking on is documentation. So sorry about that. So hopefully today will help get everybody acquainted with it, how it works, what it's doing behind the scenes, and really how you can take your applications and take advantage of it. So who am I? So my name is Mark Pieszak. I'm actually from Florida, Polish descent, hence the weird last name. I'm the founder of DevHelp.online, which is a development and consulting firm. We help a lot of big teams from like Dell to do a lot of training for companies like Career Builder and a lot of like startups, small to big. Get them going with .NET, JavaScript, Angular, pretty much any framework. There's that really serious picture of me. Oh, all right. And like I said, part of the Angular Universal team, so have a lot of sleepless nights working on that project. And I'm mainly focused on integrating with the CLI and .NET, because there's a lot of .NET. They're heavily relying on Angular and just kind of getting the two to play well together. So if anyone .NET at all? Yeah, there's one. All right. Doing this for you. I was just being silly, so don't mind me. Boom, Pieszak, spelled weird. There you go. No, you won't forget it. You can find me online on GitHub. Everything's Mark Pieszak, crazy last name, and check out our site. It's in the works right now, so hopefully in the coming weeks it'll be up online. So I guess before we get started, I kind of want to, for anyone who's not familiar with Universal or server-side rendering, I kind of want to show a little bit where it came from, what's the purpose of it, and just kind of have a good laugh at like the web kind of going full circle, at least in my book. So, you guys might remember the way the web used to be. This used to be Google, pretty gross, but fully server-side rendered, and the web used to be a lot easier, and things like search engine optimization, things like that, were never really an issue, right? Now, in today's age, with client-side, single-page applications, that's our biggest problem. We have a great user experience. We have, everything's really interactive and fast, but, how do we get kind of best of both worlds? So I'm going to call server-side rendering SSR, in case you've never, weird acronym, I think we made it up, so. And mind you, server-side rendering has gotten way better, so I'm not making fun of it in any way. Just having a laugh. So some of the things that server-side rendering really has down pat is really good SEO. When you share a link from anything server render, like a PHP app, whatever, you put it on Twitter, you get that nice social media preview, things like that. If you try to do the same thing with an Angular JS app or an Angular app, you're not going to get a photo. You're probably going to miss all those meta tags, all the blog canonical link reference stuff. But back then, it was just as easy as adding, the right tags in your code, right? Let me know if I'm going too fast. So it was really good for static sites, things like that. So with single-page applications, we basically, or client-side rendering, we kind of ended up with this whole problem, where we're rewriting everything over and over. We never know what to pick. There's always something cooler. I'm pretty sure now Vue's cool, so we're probably 2 years too late with Angular, but whatever. But part of something to me like Universal is that, you can feel confident with what you're doing. It's not just going to die off, because you won't, maybe performance and things like that, but I don't think these days there's as much of a reason to switch, at least frameworks, unless you like one. Sorry for saying Vue at an Angular conference. So, client-side rendering, really good interactivity, really good user experience. You get those great page transitions. It's perfect for web apps. And like I was saying earlier, that overall you get that nice perception, right? Things are happening, they're changing. But, almost forgot SpongeBob. There we go. So overall, really good user experience, right? But like I said, pretty bad search engine optimization. So this is like a normal app if you view source, this is what it looks like, right? So this is what Twitter sees, what Facebook sees. You know, Google's pretty decent with crawling JavaScript, but it's not perfect. And if your app is really complicated, it's not going to get everything right. And things like Bing and Yahoo, I don't think they even can, barely. So, and to me, it's really important, right? And also, like, the other big important thing is you know, I'm sure you've been on an app or going to a website on your phone. You know, you're on 3G, and it takes 10 seconds. All you see is like a loading spinner. You know, so you get one of these guys. Also kind of problematic, right? Server-side rendering is usually a lot faster. You get that quick paint. Right away, you see the app, you know, things like that. So, you know, so what can we do with this, right? Does that make sense? Everybody's good? All right. So what we're trying to do is basically bring both worlds together. We want all the good stuff from server side and everything from client side. So the reason I got attached or involved with the Universal project about 2 years ago is actually a community-driven project. So it was created by, oh, thank you. You knew I needed it. It's actually a community-driven project by Patrick Stapleton and Jeff Welpley. I don't know if you guys you've probably seen a lot of their videos on Universal Online. So it was actually community-driven at first, and about, I think, 6 months ago, maybe 8 months ago, it actually got merged into Angular Core. So now it's like officially taken care of by the Angular Core team, so you don't have to worry about like breaking changes, or everything's tested within Angular itself. So it's a lot safer to use now. It's a little risky for a bit. So all of this kind of came about, I think in 2013, someone from Airbnb coined the term isomorphic JavaScript, which sounds like some chemistry experiment, but it's basically you're trying to get JavaScript to run on the browser and the server at the same code in more than one spot, right? So this was me when I first heard of it. It pretty much blew my mind. You know, I thought it was a joke. You know, I heard of things like pre-render I/O and other ways to basically try to manually create these things, but I didn't know this would ever be possible. So the gist of it is, right, this is like the general concept. We're taking any JavaScript application, so any framework or whatever, we're trying to get it to render on the server, serialized to a string, right? So when it gets to the browser, we have that nice, fully, you know, when you view source, everything's there. And then in the background, you know, we're loading up all the actual JavaScript assets, the bundle, bootstrapping the application over like the same, you know, app root or whatever. And then, ta-da. So then at the end of it, it's now a spa. So now you have that regular, so it's Angular, React, whatever. So with Angular, you know, we have Universal. It's also called Platform Server. It's part of Core now, like I was saying. So same kind of concept. So you have your Angular code. You need Node to run it, at least for now. There's been integrations done with like .NET, and like Steve Sanderson has done like an incredible job with that. Basically spawning a Node process within .NET Core and serializing it and then returning it back all within like a really quick process and then shutting down Node. So it's pretty cool. So, you know, we're hoping soon to have integrations with PHP, Python, Java, things like that. I think there's a little Java one in use inside Google, but I'm not sure. So inside of Node, right, so there's this thing called Render Module Factory, and the demo I'm going to show at the end, it's all done in Express, if anyone's familiar with Node. And just how there's platform server, or platform browser, there's platform server, right? So with that, everything basically, we'll get into it later, but everything's going to render. Sorry if I'm rambling. Same thing, we're going to get the app into a string, goes right to the browser. In the background, we're going to load those massive bundles, and Angular does its thing, does platform browser, and when it's done, it basically replaces all the code, and then we have that normal application that you're used to. Boom. Any questions so far? Good? All right. So I guess Universal itself, how does it work? Just because I feel like understanding what it's doing behind the scenes will help you even just get a better picture of what it is and how it can benefit you. So it's a lot of dependency injection, right? So Angular itself, the compiler, the renderer, everything's very abstract. So none of it's based on the browser and the DOM the way it used to be, right, with AngularJS. So because of that, we can basically take everything that it's doing in a normal application and inject different ones for the server, right? So we're in a node environment now. So, and you'll see. So yeah, let me go to the next slide. And it's a little bit of magic too, right? So a lot of things like render factory, browser XHR, the document, platform location, and style cells, these are all replaced with alternatives, right? So, inside of Node, there is no XML HTTP request, right? There's other libraries like XHR2, which is what we're using. So for example, every time you make an HTTP request in your app, it's using dependency injection to use that instead, and then it's wrapping it all around with zones. So that's how, because basically, you don't want the app to just render, right? You want it to render when everything's done, right? So when you go to a page, let's say I go to whatever /products, it's going to hit all of your requests, and then when they're all done, the app's going to stabilize, and then when it's finished, it's going to finally render. So all this is done with this kind of, like I said, a little bit of magic. Yeah. Like location, everything's different on the server. So, all that's been taken into account. And it's not important. You don't need to ever use any of these things. I just wanted to show it because I don't think anyone ever has. So a little bit of the mystery is gone, I hope. Yeah, so how does Universal work, right? Essentially, you have your app, and that's basically everything starting with like your app component, right? And this is what we're all used to now, right? We have a module, we have the main TS, right, and platform browser. So for the server, we have an equivalent app, you can call it app.server.module, right? And this is an ng module that's a little bit different, right? So it has its own main file, and it's using platform server, right? So the difference is this app server module, you don't have to add anything really to it. You actually import your current app module into it, and then after that you import server module. So server module is actually the really big ng module inside of Universal that it's importing, and this does all the dependency injection. So, really nice. You don't have to worry about any of this. It's really as easy as pretty much that. So app module, server module. And with this, we'll get into it in a little bit. There's kind of two options with Universal, right? So there's static pre-rendering and dynamic rendering. And anyone familiar with one of them or both of them? Hopefully. Either way, so static pre-rendering is basically you're going to tell it to do it at build time, right? So you're going to tell Universal, here's my app, here's my 30 routes, and it's going to run through one at a time, build them all, and output a dist folder full of HTML files. So, this is mainly for static sites. If you have like a CMS, content management system or something, it's perfect for that. It's mainly for sites that aren't really dynamic. So like Amazon would, never do static, but you could statically generate maybe your home page or about me, things like that. And then all you have to do on the server is serve up that folder, and that's it, right? But dynamic is a little more intense. Everything's going to happen at runtime. So every request is going to hit Node, and it's going to know what the URL was. It's going to generate that app at that moment, right? So this will be more for, let's picture Amazon, and you're looking up, I don't know, socks. And when it hits that route, it's going to dynamically get all of the latest socks or products, whatever, and that's what it's going to show you, right? So each user could see something different at any moment, right? And this is much more typical. Most apps are going to go this route, right? And the only thing you have to actually do is deploy, make sure you have a node server, So this don't copy this code, but this is like a conceptually kind of what it is, right? Am I loud enough, by the way? Loud enough? Too quiet? We're good? All right. Let's make it sure. So the node server basically, right? We're gonna take in the app server module, right? Not our normal app module, the app server. And like I said, this is mock code. And essentially, right here, all I'm doing is for every request. You see my mouse? All right. we're doing that render module factory, passing in that ng module with a couple basically like initial configuration, which is our index file, right, our index HTML, and the current URL. So you can see each request, the URL is going to be different, and you can actually pass in other stuff too. So if you wanted to pass in cookies or anything, you want to hit some other API and get some kind of response and then pass it into Angular beforehand, you could do that. So, and you can see right when it's finished then, we're just going to return the HTML. Real simple. It's not actually this simple, but basically. So recently is actually pretty exciting. We've recently integrated with the CLI. So a lot of this stuff you won't actually have to worry about. Just kind of going into detail just for sanity's sake, so you feel more comfortable with it. And you can actually just go git clone. You can find it at Angular/Universal Starter. So if anyone has a laptop, you want to play with it now. There's 2 folders in there. So one is the CLI, and the other one's custom Webpack config. So that's if you really, you just want to go your own way. I mean, I recommend the CLI because it's a lot easier, and you could always eject the Webpack config, and then you'll be in a better place, I think. And the cool thing in there, we actually have demos of dynamic and static rendering. So, all right. So let's go a little bit deeper into Node Express land here. There's actually we made an engine for Express in Angular/Universal. So instead of doing a lot of things manually, this will actually pass the whole request object. It'll handle cookies. It handles a lot of stuff for you, and then you can basically access a couple tokens, and then the whole unless you want to do it all yourself. It just makes life easier, And there's going to be more stuff coming soon, so keep an eye out. All right, so here's basically the gist of it. So we have a couple polyfills. We need zone, of course, and reflect metadata. I forget the exact reason what it's for, but I think for if you don't have, you're going to get a couple of strange errors with you won't have any idea what they are. So just include that. Then basically, we're including Express. You might as well do enable prod mode all the time for server renders because there really is no just-in-time compilation, right? You can debug it, but you don't get the benefits of it. This will make it just faster. And then basically we have a little Express, starting an Express app. Right here we're grabbing the index HTML file. So in this case, like in the CLI, it has that blank, index HTML. Going a little bit further. And by the way, all this stuff there's way more detail. And if you go to the Angular CLI wiki page, there's like a big doc I wrote up that explains in way more detail. So this is just like a nice overview. And then in here you can see we're using the Express engine. That provide module map is actually needed for the CLI because otherwise any lazy loaded routes won't actually get rendered. So that's something that someone wrote just to help basically generate them at build or runtime. So just make sure you include that. And then you can see how much easier it is. You're basically starting up the HTML engine, passing it in. You got your app server, your lazy module map, and this is all typical Express stuff. Oh, whoops. There we go. And kind of like that one demo slide I had, you could see the app.get star. So the first one is for anything static, right? So if you have anything in assets, the actual index page, everything's in dist browser. So we're making sure any file that gets accessed, you want to make sure it touches that folder, right? Everything in dist server or server is going to be your node code, and we don't want people to actually get access to it. So for everything else, we're going to render, and that's basically using the Express engine, passing the current request, and then all the magic happens. So everybody with me so far? All right. Oh, sure. Better? Okay, awesome. Sorry. Not used to using a mic. So with Universal, right, there's a lot of typical gotchas that we have a couple of them on the repo that I kind of wrote out, but one of the most common is, a lot of apps unfortunately use window, right? And you're going to, maybe your app has jQuery, things like that. You know, we're not supposed to use those things, but sometimes we do, right? So one of the best things you can do if you really need window is to make sure you wrap it. Like, use dependency injection to your advantage. And so in this case, you can see I have a little window service, right? And we have a couple blank things. You could put initial stuff in there if you wanted to have like a default navigator, whatever. And you can see right here we have inside the app module and the app server, we're providing window service, but each one's getting a different instance of it, right? So the browser is going to get this function, which makes sure to see if window's there. And if it is, it passes the actual window, right? So all of this gets basically replaced with the actual window with all the good stuff in it. And the server gets basically this mock, right? And it might seem silly, but if, you know, in Node, if you have window anywhere, it's going to blow up, right? And this will help so many, you know, so many apps. If you have something like this, you could basically copy and paste this. You can use window pretty much however you want, right? But the only thing I'd recommend is, a little pro tip here, is there's in a platform server, there's two methods, is platform browser and is platform server that they are up top. So with those, you can actually grab them from with inject. It's pretty confusing the way you have to grab it, but every, like a browser, native script, universal, everything has a platform ID, which is like an object. And basically, all we're doing is testing to see if this actually is the browser, right? I recommend like anything, you know, anything bizarre you're doing, if you have like a carousel or you're doing, let's say, like a set interval or timeout, make sure you wrap it in this because, you know, you want to make sure the server doesn't do an interval, right? Because what's going to happen is during a render, you know, you're going to hit that interval and it's just going to time out basically, right? You're never going to actually get your app. It's just going to, you know, go to infinite node land, right? So in this same way with the Windows service, you can see here I'm using jQuery, which, you know, never do that. But apps do this, right? So by doing this, you're basically getting the server to ignore it, and with this, you have an abstraction, so the server never actually tries to get window, so it never blows up, right? And this code will never run on the server, because ideally you actually never want to include jQuery on the server. And I had a good demo for that, but maybe I plunk off. So similarly, recently, the document in Angular actually switched to Domino. It used to be part of Parse 5, which is basically like if anyone's ever heard of that, it's like an abstract syntax tree. It's basically like a JSON representation of your code, right? So when you see like HTML head, it says like, okay, I see a caret, the tag name's head. You know, it builds like a big tree of it, all the children, everything. So with Domino, it's a little bit better, and because of the switch, long story short, you actually can use the document safely on the server. Just make sure you grab it like that. So you have to inject document from Angular Common, and you could basically go to town on it, and this will actually work on the server. It's really cool. So because behind the scenes, you know, it's dependency injection, right? It's going to be able to query selector that syntax tree and then grab text and everything. So super exciting stuff, I know. I forgot that was a slide. So here, like I was saying earlier, with set timeouts, set intervals, always make sure you're doing testing to see if it's browser first. Because this right here, I mean, it's going to wait a second. So let's say your app takes 200 milliseconds to render. That's going to slow it down by a whole second, right? Because everything's wrapped around zones, and zones waiting for everything to finish before we serialize everything, right? So, you know, I always say do this, and then if you can, use that Windows service just in case. Then you know everything's safe. These tips will help you. So I'll pass out the slides later on, or I'll send out a link to it. So one of the new things that's coming up that's actually really exciting is transfer state, and this is coming in 5.0. Oh, that green looks really ugly. Sorry. So one of the things with any server-side rendering solution, no matter what framework or anything, is that each render is going to hit all of your requests, right? So if during the server render, I'm going to grab all the different kinds of beers, right? Angler beers. When we get to the client side, the page is going to be blank, and it's going to hit that request again and show them. So you're actually going to see like this flash, like a little flicker. Super annoying, and most people have no idea where to even start, how to fix it. So now built in is transfer state, and using this thing right here, transfer HTTP cache module, which actually comes from the NG Universal namespace, right? That one's automatically going to take every GET request, serialize them, and it's going to basically pass it down with your HTML as like a JSON object. Does that make sense? Like, so if I get beers, it's going to pass this big blob of a JSON, key value array of all the different beers in like with the HTML, and then this module is actually going to like grab that from the window, and the client's going to reuse it, right? Does that make sense? Hopefully, it's a weird one, but you don't have to worry about that problem anymore. So. Makes life easier. Oh, all right. So I actually had a really cool demo with way more stuff in it and most of these problems before and after. But I don't have that now, unfortunately. What I can show you at least is the base demo that we have. And so you can actually get this right here. So at Angular Universal Starter. And you can see, like there's a CLI in the custom Webpack. This one's a little bit dated, so I don't think I'd use that. Just go with the CLI. And what's really nice is there's a bigger list of gotchas here, things to kind of be careful for. A lot of the ones I already brought up. If you're going to do anything to elements, use the renderer. The big thing with any kind of server-side rendering with JavaScript is that things that you're used to doing, or you could get away with, you can't anymore, which kind of hurts. But there's always ways around things. It's just you have to change the way your apps are built, right? So if you take a certain existing app, let's say some big monolith app, put it in Universal, it's just going to blow up probably 20 times until you fix everything. But the good thing is once you get used to this, the next app you build is much easier, right? And your apps, if you've ever used NativeScript, NativeScript actually does a lot of the same stuff. It's a lot of dependency injection and a lot of these same problems. Like there's no window on iOS, right? So if you get used to this, it's even easier to take your app and actually make it fully mobile for iOS and Android. So in the end, it's a good pain, So anyway, this is actually right here is a basic. Oh. Full screen it. Really exciting demo, but this is the base CLI demo. So this is just an Angular CLI app, and in here we just have a home page, a lazy loaded route, and I'm not sure what that one is. So right now, if we, oh sure, better, right? Were the slides big enough? Hopefully? Okay. All right. So we could see here, did I actually get it running? I did. What I wanted to show you first was, so let's run this app normally, right? Do a little ng, you don't have an Angular CLI? npm. Okay. So let's just do like a regular ng serve. Just so we can see the exciting difference. It's not that exciting, but. Oh, wrong one. Here it is. By the way, has anybody done any Universal before? Oh, nice. Okay. Painful, right? So it's a lot better now. So that's what we'll get to in a second here. So right here, this is our old app, what we're used to, right? So if we do view source, we see there's really nothing there, right? We have that boring title, that was probably already there. We have no meta tags, and we have this blank app root. You know, all of your exciting stuff is in here. And if you had, this was products, or if you wanted to share this on Twitter, Twitter wouldn't have anything. It'd be a blank image with ng universal demo. Pretty boring. So the difference with this one is now, if you can guess, now the whole app's rendered, and this is actually what it got as immediately. So if I need to run it again. Sorry. While that's running. So you can see here, like, so basically, I didn't actually change the demo I had all the meta stuff changed and added. I could show you real quick. But you can see inside of app root, we actually have the whole app, which is pretty amazing. Obviously, this app has like nothing in it. It has hello and a couple links. But you get the point, right? If this was a huge app, everything would be here, and crawlers could go on through and scrape, see that H1, see, you know. It helps with deep linking, social media, everything. So, oh, I got it running. Okay. So how do we kind of set all that up, right? Sorry, like I said, I lost my demo. It's on this computer. Is there an easy way to open it in Atom? Like in the command line? Atom dot? Nice. That's fancy. Okay. So, exciting though, right? There we go. Woo. Universal. Anyway, it was exciting to me at least a while ago. So here's basically the basic Angular CLI app, right? And a lot of people didn't even know. Oh, sure. Thank you. Yeah. So this apps array is actually, or it is an array. A lot of people didn't know that before, or why they had it that way. So what we're doing in here, this is part of the CLI integration. We have two different apps. So you can see we have a browser one, and they're almost identical. The difference is this one's going to this browser, and it's looking for where is it? It's looking for main.ts, right? So that's kind of that starting file for this app. Now this is the standard one. So for you to take your CLI app, you can basically copy this thing, paste it right below, and right here we got server, right? And this is going to this server. It's looking for that main.server. And since we're using the CLI, we can actually build both of these apps with just a quick command, right? So part of that example, universal starter, right in here there's the scripts for building static and dynamic, right? And you can see all they're really doing is ng build prod and ng build prod app1, right? And this output hashing is just to get rid of that crazy hash at the end, right? Because for the server there's no browser caching, so we want it to be main.server bundle.js without some crazy numbers. So that builds everything, and I think I had that right here. Running these scripts, it's really quick. It's going to build out the whole app in both those folders. And if we look at this, we can see, is that big enough? Oh, I can't make it bigger. Anyway, all the assets are hidden right in there. And the only thing you need to serve up is this server.js. And this is this massive file that's basically your whole app for Node, right? So in here, to start everything up, I literally just do node dis/server, and then that's it. But yeah, I think. I'm sorry. I wish I had. I could show you later on this laptop a couple of cool demos and stuff, and even some larger apps with Universal that kind of give you like a better picture of it. Basically with this, since it's with Node, it's really easy to. If you're using AWS, if you're using Microsoft Azure, or Google Cloud Platform, all you need to do is just tell it, Node, here's my file, and then you have your app on the cloud and server rendered. So, but yeah, that's I think that's all I got. Thank you guys.